Good evening, and thank you for listening to the podcast. You are trapped in history with me, your host, Robbie Malcolmson. Welcome to episode 60. This is entitled A Reflection on the First Community Seminar. Tonight's episode is different. This is not a content-heavy narrative lecture. This is not a historical or philosophical deep dive into world, European, or U.S. history. This is a reflection about a community of individuals who voluntarily sat together and asked questions without knowing where the answers might lead in order to begin something special, something that could become more popular and, more importantly, lead to a greater impact in our communities. On November 22nd, inside of the Sikh Museum in Russellville, Kentucky, we hosted our first ever community Socratic seminar. It was sponsored by yours truly here, Trapped in History, and of course the Sikh Museum, who we were trying to bring more attention to and to raise money for. What happened that night mattered, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. And you may ask yourself, why did we do this? This was an idea for a community seminar that grew out of the classroom, something that I have been doing for the last 13 to 14 years. And I collaborate with my co-teacher and good friend of mine, Michael Elliott, as well, who helped to do the logistics and organize and create the event and run it with me. Now, for years, I watched students, teachers sit in circles and do something adults often forgot how to do. Active listening without interrupting, challenging ideas without attacking people, assuming that the others in the circle have wisdom in which I could obtain, and sit with uncertainty instead of rushing to conclusions. At some point, the question became unavoidable. If this works in a classroom, why not a community? The seminar wasn't designed to persuade anyone. It wasn't a debate. It wasn't a lecture. It was an experiment in public thinking. And that meant we had to be intentional about expectations, tone, and purpose. Now, before I continue forward, I want to make sure that I give a special thanks to one of my best friends is Michael Elliott, often goes by Pooh, the people that know him here locally. One of the football coaches, but also an incredible teacher. He teaches special education. He has been teaching with me, I think it's been 5 years now, maybe going on 6, and he is an excellent collaborative teacher. We have worked together for many years now, developing Socratic seminar questions, teaching students how to debate and think and discuss effectively, how to listen actively. And we both care about the community, and I admitted, I know he had done some work in the past, but I admitted that I have truly failed the last 17 years of my career here and living in Russellville or in Logan County for most of that time of getting myself out there and trying to do more things in my community. As some of you may know listening to this podcast, sadly I lost my mother to ALS in July. So right there at the middle of July. And I lost a student to suicide, a former one, in August. And I've been reflecting a lot more on grief and death and kind of meaning. And I thought one of the better ways to honor my community, but also my mother's memory, is to get my ass out there and put it, forward to try to do more effort at bringing the community together and using what I have trained students on for years to try to help bring the community together as well too. I know my mother would say it just like that. I've always waited for some kind of an event to happen locally in Logan County, Kentucky, that I could go to and participate. And then I got to thinking and talking with Michael Elliott, what am I waiting for? My mom would say, get off your ass and do it. And I think that's ultimately what motivated me and Michael Elliott to try to go forward and do this. This event would not have happened without Michael Elliott's good friend, and I hope that I'm becoming great friends with him, and that is Michael Morrow. A lot of people locally know him very well. He's the curator, along with other people, and a tour guide, and works really hard with the Sikh Museum and in the archives there. And Him and others really managed the Sikh Museum area and the tours and brought more attention there, brought so much blood, sweat, and tears into bringing this into the community and really trying to truly bring more people within our community and beyond to that area and to take these tours of truth and examination and to truly wrestle with these ideas. And truly, this event would not have happened without Michael Morrow. Michael Elliott and I had been there a few weeks before, and he had told me that they had planned on doing future events in the Sikh Museum's one-room schoolhouse. This one-room schoolhouse used to be located right behind Logan County High School. It is beautiful. It's very nostalgic on the inside. I'm going to try to make a photograph from the day or the night of the performance to show you kind of what it looks like on the inside. It kind of has that Mr. Keating, Dead Poets Society looking classroom, the tall ceilings, the wood floors, the wood walls, the chalkboards. It's just, you're truly performing in history. And when walking in there, I just knew I would love to be able to work in here someday and do the best I can at helping to bring the community forward. And what better way to do that than really start off in the Sikh Museum, although we also continue to try to do these events every 2 or 3 months and try different places out, not just in Russellville, but in Logan County, and maybe something like this could catch on in other communities later and become even informal discussions. They don't have to be so formal. My last thank you wants to go out to a former student of mine. He's a singer, musician, songwriter, a hell of a guitar player, and that is Elijah Bryant. He was there to participate in the Socratic seminar, in which he did an excellent job, but he also played some cover songs and some of his one or two of his own songs. It was just excellent. I was very grateful for him. He is one of the best Socratic seminar students that I have ever had the privilege of teaching in my 17 years of teaching high school history. So I was very grateful for Elijah, Michael, both Michaels and Elijah, in helping to really curate and help organize and put this event forward and really help to encourage other people. And I hope to work with all three of them going forward. Now, in terms of the day and the night or evening of this particular exercise, right from the beginning, after Elijah was done playing the music, I tried to start off by setting some ground rules, even though the majority of the participants have taught with me before. They've been former students of all kind of ages, from 18 all the way to 30. And it's really just trying to model for the community, here's what a Socratic seminar looks like on a larger scale. And here's us mocking out and trying to truly wrestle with ideas and model how to do this. So when we do this at the library in town or other locations, people have a reference point to go by. And again, it's very important that everyone is invited to this. There's never closed doors. There's not certain tables that are meant for people that are better at history or that are better at philosophy. It truly is like a democratic process. Now, at the beginning, one of the first slides that night laid out our expectations. We talked openly about open and true dialogue, avoiding hand raising to keep that organic sort of discussion nature to it, avoiding personal storytelling or narrative that kind of can dominate the room, and trying for the most part to keep answer choices or answer responses under 30 seconds or so, or at least reasonably around there. Maintaining eye contact with each other as we were talking, and of course, practicing active listening. Now, that might sound rather restrictive, but in reality, it helps to create the freedom that is needed for activities such as this. Because when everyone agrees to the same structure, no one has to fight to be heard. Everybody is in the discussion in a good nature. It can turn into some conflict. It can turn into a debate, but it doesn't have to be anybody winning or losing a debate, like debates often have a terrible stereotype that they have to do. Maybe those are great in certain circumstances, but not this particular one. The point is to come in, like I said, a voluntary, good-natured kind of person, understanding that people are coming from the right place, trying to get knowledge from them that I can take with me and then apply in my own life, apply in my neighborhood, and hopefully my community. Now, I called this at the beginning is an attempt to try to create a culture of normalcy where curiosity is normal. disagreement is normal and silence is allowed. You might be that might be the most radical thing that we did all night is just bouncing around those kind of ideas and exercising those strategies as we were going forward. Now, some of you that are not as familiar with this method of Socratic seminars or the symbolism of the circle, it kind of resembles an Alcoholic Anonymous kind of discussion or a group therapy sort of circle. It's very important as the teacher, as the leader, the facilitator, the mediator to sit within the circle. You're even with them. And as a teacher, as a 6'8", 270-pound teacher, I'm already loud, I'm already annoying, I'm already ugly. I'm trying to really bring myself to the level of the students so they can debate with me, they can spar with me in a caring, very proactive way with all the agreed upon purpose of the discussion. Now, as far as the symbolism of the circle, the chairs were arranged in a circle for a reason. There's no podium, no front, no expert seat. The circle is ancient, it's democratic, it removes hierarchy. In the classroom, the circle reminds students that authority comes from reasoning, not rank. In the community, the circle does something even more powerful. It reminds us that every voice carries some kind of weight, and no voice gets the final word. We also talked about playing the role in a good-natured way of the devil's advocate, not as a personality, but as a responsibility. Sometimes the most ethical thing that you could do in a conversation is challenge an idea you almost agree with, just to test the strength of the reasoning of the idea. It's completely and utterly healthy. Now, at the beginning, to really get sort of people more loosened up, we decided to do more of a lighthearted question. And when I started doing this method in my classes 14 years ago, I had these three sort of team building, kind of character building, sort of fun debate questions. And this was one of them. And I had a good discussion. We kind of did a 10 or 15 minute sort of warm up. And the question was, in a song, which is more important, the music or the lyrics? Now, people smiled at this and people laughed. And then people paused because suddenly the room realized this wasn't really about music. It was about meaning, about emotion versus structure, about whether feeling precedes understanding or the other way around. Now, that question was anchored on Susan K. Langer's idea that music symbolizes human feeling beyond words, a quote that I attached with the particular question. Now, right away, the room was doing philosophy without needing the word philosophy. The point is to really usher people in casually. You don't have to scare people away with academic language. Philosophy should be on a public basis on that. Bring people in and interested. If they ever want to take on the rabbit hole and go down certain schools of philosophy, then great, all power to them. That's how I got initially into it when I was around 31. Now, the questions that followed, from there, we moved into the heart of the seminar of the community. Each question stood on its own, but together they formed a map of communal sort of identity. One of the questions was, at the beginning, can a community that stops asking questions ever truly progress? And we started off by breaking down key words in it, like I do as a teacher, where we should define what a community is and what are some examples of that. Anything ranging from groups in the community to our family, to our neighborhood, to our churches, to the schools, etc. As far as what questions are, what truly means, what is progress? Is progress all forward? Is progress all good, positive? Now, this question, paired with the philosophy of utilitarian John Stuart Mill and his warning that knowing only one side of an argument leaves us intellectually impoverished. This question lingered. It wasn't abstract. People felt it in local politics, churches, schools, and families. That is what was discussed. that afternoon. Now, the next question we get to is, what kind of legacy does an ordinary person leave? With Jane Addams's quote following it up, reminding us that good secured ourselves alone is fragile. Being a part of the community, being more than just an individual is truly important, especially in an era where the individual is celebrated, maybe even to an extent overly celebrated, where you have to strive to be unique and different, and that's what you have to be like known for, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think you can strive to be an individual and also admire and respect yourself as part of something greater than just who you are as an individual. Now, that question, what kind of legacy does an ordinary person leave? That question felt personal, not grand or not heroic, but truly human. The next one we had done is, can a divided community still learn from one another? And I think this is absolutely possible. One that we did not get to that day, but I framed this question around Kwame Anthony Apaya's belief that conversation doesn't require consensus, only familiarity. And like one of my former students had stated recently, we can be brought together by our familiarity with uncertainty, with that we have in common. Some other questions that we did involved, and this was one of my favorites, is public education still the most powerful tool for community change? And I use this from Paulo Freire's stark reminder that he said education either liberates or domesticates. That question hit close to home for me and for many in the room. Many in the room brought up some points that I did not think about. One argued that public education has never been the most powerful tool, and many sort of really jumped on board that, especially whenever he used the rationale that it was family. And then several other members joined in and gave other examples on why the family is truly the most powerful tool. And I think there's other topics too, of the tool of the individual and what the individual is willing to do and willing to seek out, especially for community change. And maybe we need to think on more of a micro level and expand out, worry about our home and our house and taking care of our family. Then when ready or whenever we feel confident enough, reach out to a neighbor, reach out to the neighborhood, to eventually your community. And maybe it becomes more of a domino effect sort of thing, or at least a ripple effect sort of scenario. Now, one of the other last questions we did that day after an intermission, another one of my favorites, is who gets to tell the story of a place? And we can say anybody does, but when you get into credibility and those kind of topics, you can kind of narrow into things like historians and people of power and people that have experienced something firsthand. This was extremely interesting. And what I had overall observed that night, there are more questions too, and I'll try to remember to put those in the show notes as well. But from what I observed that night, I watched people disagree respectfully, unlike what we see on a lot of social media like Facebook and on X and other type of platforms, where people can really be disrespectful to each other while disagreeing, and they can hide behind sort of fake accounts or random sort of names. And even if they don't, they still have that sort of false courage that I'm behind something or I'm at a distance from someone else. This is much more intimate. You're looking at people and you're talking with real human beings. You don't just assume that you're talking across over the internet. The whole process is much more humanized. And I think that truly helps and inspires us to do more of these. Now, I watch people hesitate before speaking. I watch people listen without planning their response, and I watch something rare, intellectual humility in public. And maybe it isn't so rare in public when structured the right sort of way, not too informally, but just enough to be able to allow people to have freedom and the respect and the mutual understanding of what we are all in this kind of discussion for. Now, no one, quote unquote, won any kind of debate. No one performed other than Elijah at the beginning for the music, and no one strictly dominated the conversation. The room wasn't loud, it was thoughtful, and that might be the highest compliment of the whole thing. So towards the very end of the discussion, I stopped at about 2 hours and 15 or 20 minutes in, and it was an amazing moment because many of the people that were still there, which was close to 20 to 25 people, they didn't want to stop even after doing 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's a great time to stop, really, is when people don't want to. They want to continue those conversations. Many stayed after. Many talked about the topics on the outside. Many maybe drove home talking about them or met at a restaurant and continued to talk. But after it was over, after we connected on these ideas of certainty and uncertainty and what we thought an ideal community should try to do with shared values and ideas, then I showed them, hey, believe it or not, whether you're new to philosophy or you're not, here's all the philosophical topics that you did tonight without even thinking about it. You did ethics and moral philosophy, political philosophy, existentialism, aesthetics, empiricism, humanism, conservatism and liberalism, and lastly, stoicism. But more than anything, we truly wrestled with how to live together in the community. And we look forward to continuing these conversations as we go into new places, hopefully doing one at the Logan County Public Library here in February. And we would have smaller tables this time, which is much more ideal, with 6 to 7 seats at each table, each having their own discussion. And like a casino kind of style or speed dating kind of style, you can get up and migrate to any kind of table you want and be at a conversation that's short or as long as you want to be. It has that kind of a freedom. So that's what leads me to, where do we go from here? We ended these questions, not answers. And how do we take this spirit of dialogue into our neighborhoods or our homes, our churches, local businesses, and just really informal, everyday conversations? And I can ask myself, and I talked to Michael Elliott about this too, what would a true public seminar look like for Logan County, Kentucky? One where generations sit at the same table. That night or afternoon didn't solve anything, but it did something better. It reminded us that community begins with listening, and that philosophy isn't something you study, it's something you practice, or something you just study, at least on that terms. Now, in closing, if history teaches us anything, it's this. Communities don't fall apart because they argue. They fall apart because they stop talking. And on November 22nd in Russellville, Kentucky, we talked. I want to leave you tonight with these words of wisdom from a former student of mine named Lily Harris Morphus. She's a former student, like I said, and a college graduate this week. One of my best law club mock trial lawyers that I've ever taught before, and just an amazing individual. I've had the pleasure in the last couple of years of seeing her get married and now move on, and her and her husband get their own home, and now going to be starting to teach. It's just an incredible moment. And I think it was Wednesday or Thursday this last week, she wrote or typed a paragraph down about her outlook on philosophy after finishing a political philosophy course. And the professor of the class supported her in reading this out loud to the class. And I read this to my students during our own Socratic seminar last week on Thursday and Friday. And this is what Lily wrote. And I think this is an amazing thing to leave you as the listeners with. She says, philosophy becomes ideology when it forgets that these questions have no final answers. The task of political life, and perhaps of moral life itself, is to keep discussions open and to resist the comfort of certainty. Ideologies will always divide us, but philosophy, at its best, reminds us that we are united by the very uncertainty that we share. In that humility lies not weakness, but wisdom and perhaps the truest form of freedom. So thank you, Lily, for that. And all the listeners, sorry for the little bit longer break again of about 3 weeks or so. I am going to start picking up the podcast a lot more often again here, not just with philosophy, but with more content again as I get closer to the Industrial Revolution starting in England and going through that. So as usual, keep questioning the past in order to understand the present and be contagious.